now let's talk about the lungs, and this is where all of the action happens. The lungs are basically these very spongy organs that are found in the thoracic cavity. They are protected by the thoracic cage, and there's a right and a left lung. The right lung has 3 lobes, while the left lung has 2 lobes, because the heart is found right in the middle. And the heart is a little bit to the left, and that's why the left lung doesn't have enough space for a 3rd lobe. The medial part of the lung, that is where the hilum is. The hilum of any organ is where things either enter the organ or exit. So you'll find like blood vessels and nerves and lymphatics and so on, either going in or leaving the organ. The hilum of the lung is found on the medial surface of the lung, and you can find where the bronchi are going to enter. You'll find the blood vessels, whether it is the pulmonary artery or the pulmonary veins, and obviously lymphatics and nerve supply as well. The lungs are surrounded by a serous membrane, and in order to understand how these serous membranes have the 2 layers, you can kind of think of it as a balloon full of fluid, and then you put your fist in there, and now you have these 2 different layers. So the layer that touches the hand or the fist is the visceral pleura, while the other one is the parietal pleura. And you can see these 2 layers surrounding the lung. So there's a visceral pleura that is right on top of the lung, and then it reflects and becomes the parietal pleura. And the parietal pleura lines the inside of the ribs, and as you can see here, it lines the diaphragm. Okay, again, the heart is in the middle towards the mediastinum. The space between the 2 pleural membranes is known as the pleural cavity, and which is a very tiny space full of serous fluid. Now, what are the effects of smoking, cigarette smoking, on the respiratory system? So although smoking, generally speaking, nationwide is going down, there are other new ways of smoking. For example, there is e-smoking or e-cigarettes and so on. So these are just new ways of delivering nicotine. Some of them have been researched well enough, others have not. So what is the effect of cigarette smoking here? We're talking about more of the traditional cigarette smoking. Although it is found, some research is showing that, you know, the other newer ways or these newer trends of smoking are just as dangerous. So respiratory system is going to pretty much, or the smoking is pretty much going to damage a lot of things in the respiratory system, starting off with the cilia. So remember, cilia was there in order to help in brushing off some fine particles trying to get into the lungs. Well, smoking will slow it down. It eventually can even paralyze them. So now these different dirt particles and pathogens that should be trapped can no longer be trapped. Due to the chronic irritation caused by smoking, the mucus glands are going to produce lots and lots of mucus, and that's what leads to smokers' cough in the morning, where the smoker wakes up and they have to cough a lot until they expel all of that excess mucus. Because of the excess mucus and because of these paralyzed cilia, now these smokers are a higher risk of developing infections. That chronic cough can lead to chronic bronchitis, which is a chronic inflammation of the bronchi. And smoking will destroy the alveoli, leading to emphysema. Emphysema is pretty much kind of like where the alveoli fills up with air and can no longer be emptied. Lung cancer develops in about 20% of smokers, so 2 out of 10 people smoking will eventually develop lung cancer. And environmental tobacco smoking, or what is known as kind of passive smoking, where you personally aren't smoking but you're around smokers, that could also cause these same changes as well. A couple of lung irritants are asbestos, berylliosis, and air pollution. Air pollution is something, unfortunately, we are all pretty much exposed to, especially if you live in a more urban city. We're pretty much exposed to air pollution no matter, where we go. Less so in the rural areas. But air pollution can and does worsen asthma. It even causes eye irritation and can increase the risk of heart disease and lung cancer. Asbestosis and berylliosis is, are one of the reasons why we ask patients what do they do for a living. Okay, so we're not really being nosy. We're just trying to find if their occupation, if they are at high risks of different diseases due to their occupation. So asbestosis is due to the chronic exposure to asbestos. So being exposed once or twice is not going to lead to these diseases. This is more of a chronic exposure where these fibers are airborne and can lead to scarring of the lungs, leading to lung cancer and mesothelioma, which is a kind of cancer of the pleura. Asbestos is a naturally occurring mineral that was used to be used in buildings, so older buildings would have this. Beryllium is one of the elements that are found, for example, if somebody or people will be exposed to them if they work in scrap metal, mining, aerospace, and fiber optics. So if you have patients that are kind of like in these industries, you want to make sure that they are protecting themselves from berylliosis, which again is exposure to this beryllium leading to scarring of the lung tissue and can definitely lead to pulmonary fibrosis, which is scarring of all of the lung tissue. Now, how do we breathe? Okay, so breathing mechanism. Breathing or ventilation is where the air moves in and out of the body. Okay, goes down the bronchial tree and all the way down to the alveoli. The inhalation or inspiration is where the air goes in, while expiration or exhalation is when the air goes out. One inhalation followed by an exhalation is known as the respiratory cycle. So just breathing in and then out is a respiratory cycle. Now, first off, inhalation or inspiration, know that whether it's inhaling or exhaling, these are due to the differences in pressures. And the two pressures that we're going to be dealing with here are the atmospheric pressure, which is the pressure outside of the body, and the pressure inside of the alveoli, which is your alveolar pressure. At rest, when we're not breathing, both pressures are equal. So your atmospheric pressure is equal to the alveolar pressure. During inhalation, the diaphragm contracts along with the external intercostal muscles. The external intercostal muscles are muscles found between the ribs. The main muscle of inspiration, though, is the diaphragm. So that diaphragm that kind of looks like a dome will become flat. That increases the volume of the lungs. So the lungs are going to expand. When you increase the volume of something, that decreases its pressure, according to Boyle's law, which is a law of physics. Now, the decrease in the alveolar pressure pretty much means that the atmospheric pressure now is higher, and that will lead to the sucking in of air or inhalation. You can compare that kind of like with a syringe. Okay, when you pull that down, you are increasing the volume in the tube. When you increase the volume, that decreases the pressure and air goes into the syringe. While on the other hand, if you push that in, you're decreasing the volume or decreasing the space in the syringe, and that increases the pressure, and that's why air will be pushed out of the syringe. So that important law of physics, known as Boyle's law, technically states that the volume and pressure of gases are inversely related. So when one goes up, the other one goes down. Here again is inhalation, where in order for us to inhale, the pressure in the alveoli, the intra-alveolar pressure, has to decrease below the atmospheric pressure. And that can only happen when the diaphragm contracts. Here you see it at rest. This is where it contracts, where the diaphragm is pretty much flat, again allowing for the expansion of the lungs, increasing the volume, and according to Boyle's law, that means that the pressure will go down, which technically means now that the atmospheric pressure is higher, that will push air into the lungs. When we inhale quietly, so normal quiet inhalation, that is the job of the diaphragm mainly, and the external intercostals. When we need to, for forced or a deep inhalation, where you inhale as much as you can, so that you would have to use extra muscles. Those extra muscles are known as the accessory muscles of inspiration. And those are your sternocleidomastoid, pectoralis minor, and the scalene muscles. Another thing that we need to overcome in order to expand the alveoli would be the surface tension of the alveoli. The alveoli have, being part of the body, it does have interstitial tissue and interstitial fluid, which has a little bit of water in them. And water has surface tension. In order to overcome surface tension, the lung cells make surfactant. Okay, and that helps reduce the surface tension of the alveoli, allowing for the alveoli to expand. Here again, you can see the muscles of normal inspiration. That again is the diaphragm and the external intercostals. Here you see the muscles of maximal inspiration. And that would be the sternocleidomastoid, the scalene muscles, there are 3 of them, and the pectoralis minor. All of these are going to further expand the thoracic cavity. Again, the major events in inspiration. Okay, the phrenic nerve will send an impulse to the diaphragm, and the diaphragm will contract. Diaphragm moves downwards, so the thoracic cavity expands, which means that because of the increase in volume of the lungs, the pressure in them decrease. Now the atmospheric pressure is higher than the intra-alveolar pressure. That is going to push air into the alveoli. Now for expiration or exhalation, it is usually something that happens due to the elastic recoil of the lung tissue. So our lung tissue have lots of elastic fibers, and it's because of the elastic recoil of that lung tissue where the air is going to be pushed out at rest, pretty much without any contraction of muscles. All you have to do is relax the diaphragm. And remember that surface tension that also helps, that always wants to collapse the alveoli. That, helps in increasing the intra-alveolar pressure, pushing the air out. So the combination of these forces, the elastic recoil and surface tension at rest, are enough for us to exhale. Okay, both of these will increase the intra-alveolar pressure above the atmospheric pressure by about only 1 millimeter mercury, and that pushes or forces the air out of the lungs. So at rest, again, it's a very passive process. We don't need any muscles to contract. All we need is for the diaphragm to relax and the lungs will exhale. In the case of a forced expiration, we can use the abdominal muscles and the internal intercostal muscles. Here again, you can see normal expiration. So basically what you need to do is relax the diaphragm, and due to the elastic recoil of the lungs combined with the surfactant, That is going to increase the intra-alveolar pressure, elevating it above the atmospheric pressure, pushing the air out. In maximal expiration, we could also contract the abdominal muscles if we need to, and the internal intercostal muscles as well. So let's say you are trying to blow a candle and you are blowing as hard as possible, so that we perform, that is not normal expiration. That is a forced or maximal expiration. And we would need to use the abdominal muscles and the internal intercostal muscles to perform them. So the major events in expiration are basically you want the diaphragm to relax. The elastic recoil and surfactant will increase the intra-alveolar pressure above the atmospheric pressure, and that will force air out of the lungs. The next portion we'll talk about how to use a spirometer and what it measures.